Hello, folks. It's George Leoniak, and welcome to New Geometry. Today, I'm excited to be sharing a video with lots of KNEW geometry in it. We're going to talk about how we go from a form like this, with these golden hexagon faces, to this over here. And it's going to be quite a geometric journey to go from one to the other, but it's going to cover a lot of sacred geometry basics in here too, of just how the process of discovery came about and how it connects to some of the most fundamental basic patterns in sacred geometry. So let me share my screen and we'll start in on the presentation. And this is pulling upon a lot of different trails that I followed in sacred geometry. This video is going to cover a bit on the Earth grid as well towards the end. It's going to go over some of the Coxeter star and other golden hexagon and things like that that I've covered in previous videos. Of course, working with the golden ratio. And this was from a video that was called 10 New Discoveries in Sacred Geometry that you don't want to miss. Definitely go back and check out that video because there's some cool discoveries in that one related to where we're going in this. But this was one of the slides in that presentation that I was blown away when I discovered it at the time. And it really was the doorway to this further exploration I'm about to bring you on, is in the simple construction of the seed of life, which is the 6 circles around the one central large circle here. If we put a circle in it that is half the radius of the large black circle, and we draw a connecting line as if we were making an equilateral triangle in there, that line there will divide in the golden ratio right here as it intersects the actual petals, which are the 6 petals of the seed of life. And similarly, on the other side, if we just draw a simple hexagon around here, and then we draw a connecting line as if we were making another hexagon in there, it will maintain the same proportion as the lower one, also blue being 1, red 0.618. The ratio between those two would be 0.618. So in that video, I said, well, we could draw the cubeoctahedron, which is also called the vector equilibrium. It's a truncated cube or octahedron, so it's connected to the platonic solids. And I said in the video that, well, we can do the edges of the cubeoctahedron. At the time, I didn't go back and do the rest, but I just recently got around to it. And when I did, I came up with this form. So this is what happens when we truncate the cubeoctahedron all the way around in the seed of life, right? So I'm not just choosing arbitrary points or just deciding to do this. The diagram itself said, why don't you try this? And of course, in here, there are the connecting lines, which I've taken out to actually draw the form. There's a few different ways to draw it. I could show you another one in just a moment. But when I did that, I was like, oh, cool, those triangular faces of the cubeoctahedron, then they turned into the golden hexagon. Now, the golden hexagon I've been talking about for about over 2 years. This is the cubeoctahedron. Basically, we've truncated the edges of the triangle in the center to be these golden hexagon faces that you see here. And as I was saying, golden hexagon has been quite a big expansion in my understanding of sacred geometry. I realized that it was inside the internal plane of the dodecahedron. I've seen it show up in other faces of other forms, like the truncated icosahedron with golden hexagon faces. Actually, just part of the structure of geometry forms, often called irregular, but they maintain a golden proportion between the edges. So this here, large long edge would be 1, and then the other golden circle here would be 0.618. And if I draw a line across, we've got 1.618, and we even get the square root of 2 here. And of course, the square root of 2 would be in a cube or a square. The diagonal there is the square root of 2 if it is 1 inch or unit 1 edge. So this form is a golden truncated cubeoctahedron, and as I'll describe in just a little bit, it's actually a version of a golden version of the truncated cubeoctahedron. that is one of the Archimedean solids. So it's basically doing the same thing as that, except we've changed the hexagon face into a golden hexagon. And when we do that, it's going to open up different possibilities and new forms that can be created through that process. So, of course, I always love to see what information can be revealed in a form when I switch the perspective in the view. And I put it back into square view. And this, of course, also nicely lines up with the golden circle version of the seed of life in the square view. And what I like to do in this view is easier to see the inner structure of the form. So I was happy to also find that I could reconstruct the model out of Zoom tools and then build the inner structure so I can work with the 3D model. And as I built internally into the form, these dotted blue lines are going into the form here. It reproduced a cubeoctahedron at the center of the form. So this square with a counter-rotated square in the middle here is a cubeoctahedron, and that is it in 3 dimensions here. And that was cool because remember, this is a truncated cubeoctahedron, which means this one could be a truncated cubeoctahedron, and we can have some sort of implosion of the form or explosion of the form if we went out into that process of continuing to truncate these these cubeoctahedron into the golden version of the truncated cubeoctahedron. There's not much to say about this slide. It's mostly just rotating the inner structure of that form. Here's the cubeoctahedron at the center. Here's the big golden hexagon face of the form. So we're just looking at the inner structure and the cool pattern that it makes from a different perspective of the hexagon view there. Now, what I did here was start to combine the truncated golden hexagon here, the golden truncated cubeoctahedron, I mean. And when we do that, this would be going cubic in a sense because we have 4 of these now butted up against each other. And we're going to also have 4 more directly behind this. So we're going to have basically, a portion of a Rubik's Cube, a 2x2 cube here, larger one. And what was curious to me about this is that what's going to happen with these empty spaces, right? Because when we take just regular cubes and butt them up against one another, the edges just meet. But since we've truncated the form, now we have these, cavities that can be filled with other geometric forms. So when I started to work with the form through the model and the drawings, I found that, well, there are 3 other key forms that are going to fit into this. One of them is the golden truncated octahedron here, which I've talked about in previous videos, which is this form here. So it's like the truncated octahedron, which I'll show you a video of. These are all versions of Archimedean solids that have just been truncated with golden hexagon faces. Now, this one here is when you truncate this form, you see there's a triangle in my hand in this golden hexagon face. Well, that's going to actually create the dimensions to create a icosahedron inside of this form. So, of course, the icosahedron is the 20-side platonic solid. So inside this form, that triangular face, if I'm holding it like this, and there's the form, that's what the icosahedron would look like inside the truncated octahedron. So that means when we build the form out of this, we couldn't do this with regular hexagon faces, which you can do this with this kind of conglomeration of a few different forms with the truncated Archimedean solids. You would also create something similar to this with a regular truncated octahedron, but it wouldn't maintain the proportions to actually give you the icosahedron that is inside this, okay? So that's when the golden ratio forms start to show up in this cubic structure. We also have the golden truncated tetrahedron over here, which is this one here. This is one of the first forms that I discovered of this golden truncated the golden hexagon truncated forms here was this one here. And it's got the triangles, and instead of regular hexagons, we have truncated ones. So those would fit like in the corners. These would be going into the octagon faces, the irregular octagon faces, and then actually on the edges of the form of this form, if I'm calling this the edge, but it's really a face, well, inside of this, it would be the cubeoctahedron. And we could just kind of continue to go back to this and fill in all those little forms around these larger ones. And of course, we've got the internal structure that's going inside of this. And it would pretty much be an interlocked golden matrix again, which I have other videos on. This is another way to kind of work with the golden matrix, because the edge lengths are all going to be equaling the golden ratio in many portions of it, except for this one here, which is going to relate to that cubeoctahedron on the inside. So what I'm realizing here is that there's actually a whole version of Archimedean solids that are the golden versions of the forms. And that basically means, so here's our Archimedean solid. I have a whole video on the Archimedean solids of how to draw the 11 of the 13 of them with some awesome golden ratio or non-golden ratio techniques to draw many of them. And all these required using square root of 2 circles or half the radius of the large circle here. And this one all requires the golden ratio. So once we do the golden seed of life, the information that we need within this, and when I say golden seed of life, basically the circle inside the smaller circle inside the larger one is in golden proportion, in golden ratio to one another. And that's been the doorway to a whole exploration in KNEW geometry, new geometry, that has taken the seed of life pattern and added golden ratio to it. So we've come up with a whole new set of Archimedean solids that are the golden versions, and there's a lot more to explore there. So basically, you know, these patterns of the Archimedean solids here, they don't all just work out nicely in the flower of life or in the seed of life. You need to do some different things to the diagram in order to get the drawings that we see here. Different size radius circles, for instance. These all required the same size radius circles, infinitely getting smaller within golden ratio proportions to pick up different vertices. Okay, so now that's the first portion of this presentation that was mostly about this form. And this is where things get, you know, to the next level for me, because we're pretty much working with the cubic building block here. And I was showing you how these fit together and how the other Archimedean solids fit in there. Now what I wanted to do was to take the same the golden truncated cubeoctahedron here and rotate it around in 5-fold symmetry, which would be, you know, akin to an icosahedron or a dodecahedron or the icosahedron, right? So what happens when I start to move this around into essentially make 5 of these inside of this? Because this is one cube, let's say, truncated, right? It's a cube that's been truncated, or a cubeoctahedron that was the original truncation, but there's one of them. And in the dodecahedron, there are 5 cubes or potentially 5 of these. So the first thing I did was to draw up the cube, truncate it in here to the cubeoctahedron, meanwhile, I'm doing this all hand-drawn. I don't have the, or hand-drawn on the iPad at least. And then I'm going to truncate it once again, the cubeoctahedron down to this. And then I'm going to do that 4 more times to come up with what happens, right? What happens when we add all 5? Because there's another form waiting to be discovered in there. Well, there it is. A new form is born, right? So I'm seeing that the rotation of that form is going to create a decagon in the middle. And there's a triangle between the edges of a few of those forms. These are all the color-coded ones, so it's a little tricky to follow them out, but we got, you know, a blue and a red one there, maybe a golden one. I'm not sure of all the different colors there. It's a little confusing to look at after a while. But we've got decagon face and another outline, and I'm like, wait, is this a new form or is it something that I might have discovered once before? And yes, it is. Surprise. It's me again. Coxeter's Nonagon face is back. So the rotation of this form actually produced a form that I created, first discovered in the fall of last year. So pretty much 6 months later, was this Nonagon face form being held right now at this perspective to you from the Pentagon view. And prior to this drawing, all I was able to do was draw it in the hexagon view. So this was really exciting to be able to draw it and take it on that rotation into the pentagon view. And it was through the rotation of this form that provided the correct vertices. And this is the first time that I drew it. Here it is hand drawn, and as well as the build that I was just showing you, and constructing the nonagon faces. So it's not a regular nonagon. This relates to the icosahedron stellation diagram of Coxeter's and his crew. And I'll show you that in just a few moments. And I'll give you how many faces and edges this has in a second too. But when I first discovered this, I was in a process of taking the dodecahedron and icosahedron, doing this process of rotating them around 5 times, and seeing what came up. This one has 6 icosahedron. There's kind of the 5 of these actually create the single one that's in the center, and they share the vertices of that one. So each icosahedron of these, right, they each have 30 vertices. So if we had 6 of those, you would think, well, great, it would add up to 180, but it's actually 150 because the combination of all these 5, they combine in a way that they share the one of them here, okay? So there are basically 5 of them, and they recreate the one in the center. So, but when I did that, it created this form that I just did, that I was just showing you. This is in the hexagon version, and it has 92 faces, the 12 decagon, and 30 of those irregular shaped nonagons, and those little isosceles triangles, 60 of them, to kind of be the connectors between the decagon and the hexagon faces. Not hexagon, decagon and the nonagon faces here that we see. So let's just talk briefly about the Coxeter's star. This is a video you might want to see that I did a while ago about it. This star is a key to understanding sacred geometry because this star is a flat plane, and it's easy to draw in sacred geometry that I discovered, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But from this, I could build a bunch of forms, starting with the octahedrons, cubes, from this flat plane, I can grow them out. And in this video, I do a 3-dimensional, zone tool software that allows me to rotate the forms around so you could see the forms coming off of this icosahedron stellation diagram. So very cool video to check out. And this was a discovery from Coxeter. I think it was back in the 30s, maybe. And this is 59 stellations, and this is the close-up of the diagram. And all these numbers are actually giving you like a cutting template to create some amazing forms. But this star, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, those 9 points, remember, they're a flat plane. They're called the final stellation of the icosahedron diagram because it's the furthest points that will go out when we extend them out. And all these other stellations are kind of within that. So this was the 13th stellation. And if you take those planes and put them together, you'll come up with this, echidnahedron, which is the final stellation. Now, I was able to put this back into the structural geometry of the dodecahedron and realize that inside the cube, or the stars that would be on the pentagon faces, if you made stars on each pentagon faces, which are each edges of the cube, the little pentagon that's in the middle, the vertices of this form, these little 5 vertices that are creating those small little pentagons, are actually within the dodecahedron inside the compound of the 5 cubes. That was just amazing that happened to be like that. Okay, so let me just back up a sec. That was kind of the first time I discovered this 92 phase form. I was giving you a little history on working with Coxeter's stellation diagram and bringing it into sacred geometry, because when I first saw it, I just thought it was some mathematical discovery and they just chose lines and this is what it came up with. I didn't realize it was so deeply connected to the golden ratio, and that it was easily discovered in the heart of, sacred geometry. Some of the most basic drawing templates give us that diagram easily. Now, the second time that I discovered this form, the big 92 face form here, or the 92 vertice form here, with the nonagon faces and the decagon faces, was with this. I, was getting creative with that nonagon face, and I realized, well, it's inside a triangle, right? This nonagon face is within a triangle, and if I truncate a tetrahedron, let's say it was a big tetrahedron, with this nonagon face having 4 of those, it would create golden hexagons in the corners. So I compounded it together, a red and a blue one here, and that one created the, these hexagon faces in the 8 corners. And it was kind of like the internal structure of the nonagons were joined together. I actually counted out what these vertices were, like what's the internal structure, and it came out to actually be the form was a compound of 9 octahedra. So each of these are connected to an octahedron, the vertices here, and there'd be 9 octahedra within inside this form. So I also did the same thing within the form, but I didn't do it from pentagon view. I worked to discover how this form, if I were to rotate it around once again 5 times, well, what does it create? Well, it also created the same form, which is the nonagon decagon structure that I'm talking about here. And then it dawned upon me after I realized, wait a second, that is the same form pretty much as this one here, the truncated cubeoctahedron, has a relationship to this one. The only difference is that this one has the nonagon face, which is raising up this point. I have the 2 layered here, and this is just that flat octagon. But if we drew the connecting lines, this golden hexagon is in the same position as it is in this form over on the left. So the outer hull, the hull of this could be overlaid over top of this one here. They could go together, and you're going to have the golden hexagon in the same spot. So essentially, I recreated something that I already discovered, but I did it in a different way through truncating the cubeoctahedron with the golden hexagon faces here. And, nevertheless, I was able to discover how to draw it in a pentagon view, which was really exciting to me because I think it's a beautiful design, and the drawing of it is actually fairly doable and pretty easy in following out the pattern. This one's a little bit more complex, and it just has a beautiful symmetry to it. So that was exciting because it took me 6 months more to come back around to it by surprise. But because I had discovered pentagon view and I had hexagon view, within a day or so, I was like, okay, we have to figure out square view, which is the twofold symmetry. And with the help of the pentagon view, I was able to rotate the form around to discover the drawing technique that would produce the square view drawing of it. And this one is going to prove very useful because it gives me a nice circle around the form that has it touching all the vertices, so I'm able to work with it in a different way for the expansion of the form. In just a moment, I'll show you. But of course, with square view, just so you know, the front lines here, the ones that are towards us, right, are the same as the back lines. So there is no back drawing to this. There's no lines that are going to fill in any of these spots. The front is the back. And for the hexagon view and the pentagon view, those, if you're looking through the form as if it were like a wireframe structure, you would see the lines on the back, and those produce some lovely patterns. of the hexagon view on the left and the pentagon view here on the right that really conceal the form, right? So if I were to color in the form here, like I did here for a Happy Spring Equinox Facebook post, it would be tough to tell that that this is the structure of the form with the decagon and triangles here, and here's another decagon on an angle back here, and the nonagon faces back in here too, this shallow one. Well, that is this one colored in, right? And that, of course, is back to this one here. So it's nice to see it with the front and the back lines because it really takes on a very creative artistic representation. And I believe that this one is fairly easy to draw. But it didn't stop me from drawing all of them by hand, which are all definitely doable. And Danny Burgess has drawn this one. I sent them the layout lines for it. So it is a doable task. It's definitely a kind of next level sacred geometry here. But the beauty of it is that, to my amazement, really, and hopefully to yours too, that it's even possible to draw these forms of this this structure, this form that, I don't know, came out of the ether into my mind and into the working with the sacred geometry and the patterns and the forms, that it even came to be, and that it holds its integrity through these three main views, and that all the lines and the nodes and whatever we need to draw it from those three perspectives that I've talked about ever since sort of my first videos, it's all contained within the golden ratio circles, and some creative use of finding the connecting lines that are going to give you the vertices and edges that you need to show the form accurately from three perspectives. It's never been done for this form before, so it's a brand new NEW form that has all the validation that it needs from working with hand-drawn sacred geometry and holding those sacred ratios. Now, this is something that this slide here that I showed in another video, and shortly after I realized what it was, but I never went back to put it into the video. But what I realized, if we're looking down at our form, this is in the hexagon view. Now, this is the front and the back lines. We don't need it to be that way with front and back lines. But remember, there's a plane going through this form. If you hold this just at this angle and you rotate this around, there's a plane that's going through the center of this, like you cut an orange in half. There's the radius or the diameter of this circle cut in half here, this sphere cut in half. So we're looking at a slice. Well, I noticed that there are 18 points going around here, right? And they're in these little clusters of groups of 3. 1, 2, 3 are together, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. Right? And now those are 18 actual vertices that are on the surface of a sphere. So they're touching the sphere that's around this form. And that's one plane through the form. So I was curious about that spacing that I saw there, and what do you know? Coxeter's Nonagon star is back, but ×2, because the blue one inside the form, looking down at it, now this is just without the back lines of the form, but remember, it's just one single plane, just like the plane that is in this stellation within this form, right? This is a flat plane going through the form. This star is a flat plane. If we just flip this star around to have two of them, that's still a flat plane. Well, that flat plane of those two Coxeter Nonagon stars are in the center, dividing through the midpoint of the form, basically in 10 planes. So there are 10 planes because there are 20 of these faces, these Nonagon faces. So there's one Nonagon, and then there's another Nonagon below it. And this is now through the center of the form. So we have 18 points along there. And these two stars I just drew here in a different technique, which was cool, to only draw it with 6 circles here in golden proportion. Those two are superimposed on one another, and they are now inside the core of the form, basically, on 10 planes. which is just, that was really awesome to me. Now, you might be like, well, great, that's Sam's getting like a little out there. How does this relate to some of the hand-drawn techniques that we're more familiar with? Well, this star, this is at the center of the seed of life. Both stars, the 18 points, are at the core of the seed of life, six around one, six circles around this one big one. When we take the half the radius of the large circle and put it in the middle here, basically, creating if we put an equilateral triangle and drew a circle in that equilateral triangle, where that circle intersects both the petals as well as the three lines of symmetry here. If I just go around and connect all the dots between those, like let's go to larger, this is just zoomed in. If you just go around petal, line of symmetry, petal, petal, line of symmetry, petal, so on and so forth, that is the 18 points. And so basically this form, the 18 points of this form that are the circumsphere, the radius of the form, or the circumference of the form around it, is right around those 18 points. So this form, the outline of this form, looking down at it from above, from hexagon view, is right here in the seed of life. I mean, it's right there the whole time, and Nonagon star is there too. That's just phenomenal to me that it's been in there all along. And it's come to life and become the rest of the form is filled in through it. It'd be very difficult to draw all the rest of the form in this little spot, but it's right there. So, and if we make triangles in here, 6 triangles, it's very cool the way these triangles interact with one another. There's some golden ratio divisions between the relationships that show up there. There's probably some more in there. I didn't check them all out, but very cool. And it's all right here within this simple design. Of course, Coxeter's Nonagon star here is just full of golden ratio too. So, okay, now we're going to go on to the next part of this because, one thing leads to another for me. I start to think about the Earth grid and getting some great circles involved. So what's a great circle? Well, if we draw this circle around the form by connecting the vertices that would, kind of go in the easiest route of going around, connecting vertice to vertice to vertice around the sphere of the form, will create kind of a hoop or a great circle. Now, it's kind of an optical illusion here because you can kind of trace out an outline here that looks like a nice hoop going around there, right? Well, that's actually 2 of the circles because this one's going along the front and then it zips along to the back, which we don't see, but there's another one following that same orbit, let's say. So just a little bit higher. So it's a mirror image of the other one is what I'm saying. These 2 just look like straight lines, but that's going up and around and straight back. So it's that plane is, that's one of those planes, I guess. It's just a line now. So there are 10 here, basically, is what I'm saying, 10 of those hoops. And it also contains the Icosahedron, remember? So these would be the 6 great circles. So I have 16 circles already within here. And these lay really nicely over what's called the balance lines within the Earth grid model, which really gives you the pentagon and the star within the pentagon. So this is, let me just move that one to the side there, and you could see the overlaying of the crisscrossing of the lines of how they fit. And here, of course, you've got these little bends as it's bending along to kind of follow that curvature. But it's giving you those extra vertices you need. So it's not just a straight line that zips across, which you can do to create that arc, but this is giving you a few other contact points on the surface of that sphere as it bends around here to continue around. So this is the 16 lines. And of course, I always aim for Buckminster Fuller's 31 great circles. In fact, I have an amazing video on constructing the 31 great circles, which I didn't bring that form out, but I create the spherical structure using sacred geometry techniques out of 31 great circles. Look that one up. I think it's called Constructing the 31 Great Circles with Sacred Geometry Techniques related to the Earth grid. So what I did next is, because I knew I had those 16, I need 15 more great circles. Now, I could do them because I already have octahedron in here to give me those other hoops, but I wanted to kind of fill out the rest of the form here, and all I really need is a icosahedron and a dodecahedron to touch the surface of that sphere that the rest of the 150 vertices are connected to. So what I did was, in square view, I can draw an icosahedron very easily and draw it to the appropriate dimensions so that it touches the sphere. This is the nice thing about square view, is it gives me a nice golden rectangle in the middle that touches the sphere, and the dodecahedron also touches the sphere. So there's no optical illusion of the form sitting inside the sphere and the sphere is floating off in the distance, right? This is in contact, this is in contact. So now all I did is, connect the vertices to the rest of the form, and all of a sudden I've got a central point in the decagon and a central point in the nonagon, which is what I needed. I had the rest of the hull, so now I just connect the dots between all that, and then I come up with this new form here, which is a new Earth grid, or a new Earth, I like to call it, the new Earth model, KNEW Earth model, because it really is, for me at least, just a beautiful representation of how all those nodal points of the 62 vertices of Becker-Hagen's grid line up on here, which is the UVG grid layout here, as well as the some additional vertices, which are the construction of the form here, bringing in the nonagon. It's an irregular nonagon, but it's a special nonagon because it's related to that icosahedron diagram, and it integrates so well with the decagon and the other structures here. Now, of course, this would be an envelope, but that would be more its surface all the way around rather than floating out in the distance like this. But this perspective kind of drawing in Google Earth here kind of warps it down, makes the form look like it's floating in the distance. But the central points we can kind of line up on the Earth grid map here. And if I move the form out of the way, we could see, I guess I put it as one solid unit. So let's just leave it as it is. But let's take a look at a little more details at the form. So here it is, a new Earth model. Let's create it. So was excited to build the form. It's the one that I showed you at the beginning, and I said, how are we going to get from that truncated golden rhombic cubeoctahedron here, or the cubeoctahedron? How are we going to get to that? And this is how we get to it, is basically, do some cutting and folding and taping, and make the template. And I love the numbers on this. They're really, really cool. We have 182 vertices and 360 faces, right? When we count up everything around. And there are 4 types of isosceles triangles, right? So we have the ones that are off the decagon, all the same ones on the decagon, and then there are 2 different ones on the nonagon faces. So we got 60, 60, 120, 120. So we got 6, 6, and 3 and 3 if we're doing some digital compression. Of course, this adds up to 9. And then when we add all that up, we get 540 edges, which is an awesome, pentagon number of adding up the angles. So we've got the 9, 9, adding up to 9, 360. We got 540 at 9. And 182 vertices, very, very close to 180. We have 2 additional vertices in there. So anyway, there's the form from the hexagon view, the pentagon view, and the square view. So just very, very cool overall discoveries there. And if we look at the whole thing together, some KNEW geometry for you. We've got the new drawings here that are these forms, particularly this one. I haven't done all of them like this yet. And then we have some of the contributing forms that were part of the process of discovery to get there. So I just want to, once again, just reiterate that so much of what I just shared is really at the heart of the most simple diagram in the seed of life. Here it is in a close-up. It's been here all along when we just go around and use the circles to interact with the other circles to do some dot connecting here. It's going to give you that nonagon star, and both are in there, the 18 vertices of the form that I showed you all on that plane. And it's right within the drawing of the seed of life, which is just so amazing to me that that information has been carried along within this design until I believe now that I've brought that to light. I've been talking about that. I've never seen that anywhere else. I really don't know how Coxeter and his crew discovered it. There are a few different drawing techniques of how to come up with this, but this is one of the probably the most simple ones that puts it back, like I said, back in the heart at the foundation of the seed of life pattern. So that's the overview of the video, and I hope you enjoyed my geometric journey that I've been on there to come up with this awesome new Earth model, and how, hopefully you could see how some, sacred geometry and engaging it with it will kind of guide you along a process. And it should, for at least for me, it really feels like a process of discovery, how you might circle back to a similar thing that you've been following to see it from a new perspective. It's really like an epiphany and a aha moment, not like, oh, here I am again. I already did that. It's more like, I can't believe I followed this path and ended up at the same place. It's like the geometry wants to show itself and reveal itself in many different ways, because it's all interconnected from whatever view you come about it. I'd say the biggest discoveries in this, which really expanded sacred geometry for me, of course, is the golden circle templates, and starting to treat these irregular faces like these hexagon faces that I've been working with, and even working with the nonagon faces like this one here, those irregular nonagon faces, is really expanding the ability to entertain some different possibilities than just working strictly with the Archimedean solids or Catalan solids and the Platonic solids and other stellations of those. This new face has really been a way to explore new terrain. So I love doing that with people. So if you feel inspired to join me on an apprenticeship, I have one coming up in about 2 weeks. So that would be April 3rd of 2023. So join me on that. I share some of these things. We don't do these big complicated drawings, but giving you all the tools and the direction to move forward with your exploration of sacred geometry. And over at New Geometry Courses, where you can learn more about the apprenticeship, I got a whole bunch of courses, with various price ranges to get started, and even a free intro drawing video. So check that out too. Check out New Geometers Facebook group. Amazing geometers there, almost 3,000 members now. They're really sharing such great work, and it's really inspiring to see them working with the sacred geometry and following their trails. And let's see, subscribe to this channel if you like the video, and I'll be back with another video shortly. So much love and appreciation, and I'll see you later. Bye.